standing on traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of indigenous peoples. Here where I sit and stand, these are the homelands of the Menominee people. In addition to the Menominee Nation, there are 10 other federally recognized Native American sovereign nations in Wisconsin, as well as the brother town that is not yet recognized. Today, we honor the Stockbridge-Munsee Nation. The Stockbridge-Munsee are one of the 3 New York tribes. Like many ancient peoples, they were bonded with others who were being forced from their ancestral lands. The Mohicans became known as Stockbridge because Northeast settlers referred to them by their village name, Stockbridge. The Munsee peoples joined them on their way to Wisconsin. One of the Stockbridge-Munsee symbols is called Many Trails, acknowledging the many long trails their ancestors took that landed them in Wisconsin. We acknowledge their love of the land, which they continue to call home. By acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional land of these sovereign nations, we honor with gratitude the land itself and all of the winged, 2-legged, 4-legged, many-legged, and the water peoples who have stewarded the land and water throughout the generation or for generations to come. In addition, the League of Women Voters believes that it is important that we begin by saying that the League stands as an ally to all of our communities of color, our LGBTQ communities, our differently abled communities, and all other targeted communities, and will do whatever is in our power to work with all communities to fulfill our mission to empower voters and defend democracy. Thank you for your interest in this forum and for your support of the democratic process. This is a nonpartisan candidate forum for voters to get to hear what the candidates have to say. It is not a campaign event and not a debate. We stand for civil discourse. The candidates understand that no candidate information is allowed to be displayed during this event. This Zoom forum is being recorded and will be made available on both vote411.org, the League's Webby Award-winning website, and the League of Women Voters of Appleton website. It is also being live streamed on Facebook. The League of Women Voters is strictly nonpartisan and as such does not support any party or candidate, although we do advocate on research-based positions. Our sole purpose in presenting candidate forums is to provide an opportunity for voters to see and hear the candidates express their views on issues relevant to the election. As comments and opinions from forum attendees distract from that purpose, the comment section will be monitored and all comments will be deleted. If you have comments or additional questions for candidates, please refer them directly to their individual campaigns. Any questions sent to the League's email prior to the forum will be sent to the candidates and their answers will be added to the candidate voter guide. The League of Women Voters of Appleton owns the copyright to any audio or visual recording to these events. Unauthorized videotaping falls under the rules of the FCC, which requires that a forum must not be edited and must be broadcast in its entirety, either live or reasonably soon after it takes place. In addition, the League of Women Voters of Appleton candidate forums must not be referenced as a source in any campaign materials. While there is not a sign language interpreter, there will be closed captioning available on the YouTube video, which will be available through the League of Women Voters website, and YouTube videos are also available in several languages. Prior to tonight's forum, residents were invited to submit questions to the League email. Some of those questions will be heard tonight. These questions have been sorted before they were sent forward. This was not to eliminate questions, but rather to group them into like categories so that we have the opportunity to ask as many questions as needed to cover a variety of topics. We have a timekeeper. The League has always found this process to be a good means to keep us on track and moving along. It is not meant to cut people off or diminish the importance of a response, but simply to use our time wisely. And finally, we would like to acknowledge the candidates for Calumet County Circuit Court Branch 2, Carrie John Reed and Kimberly A. Tenorelli. We are all grateful and thank them for their willingness to run for office and serve their community. Jacqueline Klimaszewski is Director of Voter Service for the League of Women Voters. Jackie has planned and organized this forum. She will be presenting the questions to the candidates. Jackie?
Thank you, Jean. Let me add my gratitude to the candidates for your time this evening to share your viewpoints with our voters. And I want to thank everyone who's viewing this for caring enough to be informed when you cast your votes in the election on April 6th. All the questions that were submitted, asked and unasked, will be sent electronically to the candidates. And I have more questions than we are going to get to in this hour. So you can look for those. It usually takes us about a week to get that put together. For each question, each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond, and that's monitored by our timekeeper, Julie, with her paddles there. We will alternate which candidate replies to the question so that they both have a chance to be first and last, and whoever goes first in the very, very first question will be last in the very, very last question. So I am not a lawyer, nor have I played one on TV. In my preparation for this forum, I needed some background on the circuit court. And so this is a slide that I'm just going to go over briefly, because as I was doing some delving into this, I think there's the breadth of what this encompasses needs to be shared with all of you. The Wisconsin circuit courts are the state's trial courts. Circuit courts have original jurisdiction in all civil and criminal matters within the state, including probate, juvenile, and traffic matters, as well as civil and criminal jury trials. So we have a variety of topics this evening. And I am looking forward to learning more about the circuit court, as well as learning about the candidate's stance on these issues. This graphic, I will be sharing a link to it. So if you want to see this again in depth, I'll be sharing that later. So we can take that slide down. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get started with the questions, and we are asking the questions starting with candidate Reed and then candidate Tenerelli. And we have, that is because that's how they are on the ballot. Candidate Reed is first on the ballot and candidate Tenerelli is next. So the first is 2 minutes, and it's about an introduction. Please introduce yourself, including how long you have lived in Calumet County and your community involvement. What in your professional and community background qualifies you for this judicial office? And how will your experiences assist you in working with people from diverse backgrounds who will come before you in court? Candidate Reed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, President Roberts. Thank you, Jacqueline Klimaszewski. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum. Thank you, Attorney Tenerelli. And thanks to the voters who are live streaming this tonight. And most of all, I'd like to thank my wife. She's been behind me throughout this whole campaign. She was with me in the snow in December collecting signatures, in the freezing cold in the months that followed thereafter, putting up signs, and then putting them back up when the wind blew them down over the last couple of months. I could not have done this without her. So Amy Jo, I thank you so much. I'm honored to be here to introduce myself and to tell the voters why I'm the most qualified candidate for the new judge position in Calumet County. And I think the thing that sets me apart from my opponent is that I am the local candidate. I believe that I have more experience, and I'm supported by more judges, law enforcement, firefighters, and colleagues. One of the areas that Jacqueline Klimaszewski told us to get into is how long we've lived in the county. My wife and I moved to the village of Harrison 19 years ago. This is where we built our home, and this is where we have raised our daughters. We love Calumet County. Calumet County is our home, and we intend to stay here. I mentioned my experience. I have 24 years of experience as a legal practitioner. I haven't just been a government attorney. I opened my own law office in 2000 and have employed several people. I have practiced a variety of areas of law, and I'll be able to handle any case that comes before me on day one as your next judge. I'm so honored to have so many judges, so many law enforcement, firefighters, and colleagues supporting me. And I am honored to be here to answer your questions and talk more about the circuit court. Thank you so much.
Candidate Tenorelli?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. It's always important that communities get involved and know who their candidates are. I'm currently the Corporation Counsel in Calumet County, and this is my 6th year in that position. Prior to that, I was a state prosecutor for 16 years. I started in Outagamie County and then worked in Fond du Lac County. As the Calumet County Corporation Counsel, I handle all civil matters, including child support, emergency detentions, protective placements, guardianships, CHIPs, and termination of parental rights cases. CHIPs, Children in Need of Protection and Services, as well as advise county departments on various legal issues that affect them through the county. As a prosecutor, I started as the domestic violence prosecutor in Outagamie County and went to Fond du Lac as a general assistant district attorney, handling all types of cases from felony to forfeitures. I then became the deputy district attorney and handled all cases, including some administrative functions, including working with the county board on securing a prosecutor for specifically sex assaults and domestic violence. And then I became the juvenile justice prosecutor and handled all juvenile matters. I've had thousands of hearings. I've had about 50 to 75 jury trials. I've appeared before many judges throughout my career. And I get this question on the trail. So I graduated at UW-Madison Law School, cum laude. I've been married to my husband, Keith. This will be our 25th year. We have 4 daughters. 2 are happily married. 1 just got married last weekend. Those are from Keith's previous marriage. We have 2 daughters. Emma's a freshman in high school and Grace is in 7th grade. I've been in the county for 6 years. I've resided in there about a year or less, and I'm an extremely hard worker. I'm dedicated and prepared.
Thank you. So Candidate Tenorelli, the next question is, what should citizens understand about the roles, duties, and importance of the different levels of our state court system?
Well, circuit courts, as the original exhibit showed, it handles disputes, civil disputes, criminal disputes, and if the litigants aren't happy with how those turn out, then they go to appeals court, and if it's related to a constitutional issue, it'll go to the Supreme Court. So most individuals will have contact with the circuit courts, and this position would be in the circuit court. So if you have a traffic violation, if you have a criminal or a civil matter, this circuit court would be the individual that you would appear before. Appellate courts handle the appeals for the litigants if they're not happy with how the circuit court decides. And then those cases can be appealed to the Supreme Court, but only if the Supreme Court accepts them. The district courts have to take all cases that are before them. Appellate courts have to take the appeals that come before them. Supreme Court gets to decide as to what cases they are going to be hearing. And typically they have to have issues, there has to be an issue that affects not just one litigant, but could be affecting other litigants and has a constitutional issue. Thank you.
Candidate Reed, how would you answer that? What citizens should understand about the roles, duties, and importance of the different levels of our state court system?
Well, that's a great question. I've had the fortunate opportunity to be involved in all 3 levels of the court as an intern with the Court of Appeals. I've had cases that were recently handled by the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And of course, I've been in the circuit court. So basically there's 3 levels of courts. The judge position that we're talking about is the circuit court level. That's where folks come in for their disputes in the circuit court. Here's the facts and applies the law to those particular facts. The Court of Appeals is the error correcting court. So if the circuit court one of the litigants believes there was an error, they can take it to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals will take briefs on that case and hopefully correct the errors. The Supreme Court, as Attorney Tenerelli stated, they pick and choose which cases they're going to take from the Court of Appeals, and they're more involved with setting policy and refining the law. So there's basically 3 levels of the court system where litigants get an opportunity to have their cases heard. As I said, I interned with the Court of Appeals when I first started when I was in law school. Really enjoyed that process. I've had several cases that I've had before the Court of Appeals. It's an enjoyable process. And I had 1 shot or 2 shots actually in my career with the Supreme Court. And I've just enjoyed every bit of it. So great question. Thank you so much.
Candidate Reed, what is your judicial philosophy?
Well, judges have, they take an oath to apply the law to the specific facts that come before them. I took a oath as a lawyer in 1997 to uphold the laws of the United States and the state of Wisconsin, and I've taken that oath very, very seriously. I'll do the same as a circuit court judge. The interesting thing that a lot of folks ask me on the trail is my views on this, that, or the other thing, and these are all great questions, but the reality is this: circuit courts must apply the law to the facts before them. They don't get to pick the law. They don't get to legislate from the bench. They must apply that law. So while I have lots of views, just like every other person on lots of issues, the law before me is the law that I'll apply, and I'll have no problem doing that. The variety of cases that I've had throughout my 24 years, I think gives me a distinct advantage in the types of law that I'll be hearing. But again, applying law is the most important thing to the circuit court, to the facts before it. And I look forward to that opportunity to do that as the next circuit court judge.
Candidate Tenerelli, what is your judicial philosophy?
Thank you. My judicial philosophy is very similar to Attorney Reed's. I will not legislate from the bench. I've had many questions on the campaign trail of what is your position on this, or what is your position on that? What party are you affiliated with? And my opinions aren't relevant as it relates to deciding cases, because I have to decide the cases based on the law and the facts before me. And I will steadfastly hold to that. I think you can speak to anybody I have worked with in the past or work with now, that I'm extremely ethical, that I would not let outside influences influence me, which is easier said than done, but I feel more than qualified and capable of doing that. I will decide based on the very specific issues before me and nothing more. Thank you.
Okay, Candidate Tenerelli, what does equity, diversity, and inclusion mean to you as relating to the justice system? What can the circuit court do about the disproportionate rate of incarceration of minorities? And what role could you as a judge play to address and diminish inequities in sentencing in Wisconsin's judicial system?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What does equity, diversity, and inclusion mean to you as relating to the justice system? What can the circuit court do about the disproportionate rate of incarceration of minorities? What role could you as a judge play to address and diminish inequities in sentencing in Wisconsin's judicial system?
Thank you. So in equity, diversity, and inclusion in the justice system, I believe that I've had some great mentors that are judges that have taught me to look at equity, diversity, and inclusion, and that some people have not had the same benefits or chances growing up. And so while you don't necessarily give them a break, you have to consider that when, as a judge or as a prosecutor, how to deal with that issue. And consider that the disproportionate rate of incarceration for minorities is a significant issue. And I'm not going to solve that problem by myself. That's going to have to be worked out through the community, educating the community, educating law enforcement, educating the judiciary, because there are some judiciary or judges that might not agree with that statement. So I think education is key, and looking at experts and looking within the community and talking to those individuals as to how best to diminish that rate. Again, it's not going to be one person deciding it. It's really going to be a group effort.
Thank you. Candidate Reed?
Thank you. These are really great questions. I'll tell you this. I've been an attorney for 24 years, and as a private practice attorney, that means I represent individuals. I represent real people. I represent people from all walks of life, all ages, sex, race, religion. And what that has done is it's given me the personal relationship with these folks. It's given me the lawyer-client relationship where I get their versions of events. I get their stories. I get where they're coming from, and I get all of the experiences that have brought them to the situation that they find themselves in. That's the kind of thing that has made me a good lawyer. That's the kind of thing that has made me understand folks every day in my practice. I find it to be extremely valuable. I can learn more every day, and I do every day. And the people that come to me are why I want to do this. So I think that diversity, inclusion, and equity are the cornerstones of justice. And I look forward to working hard every single day to make sure that everyone has access to justice.
Okay, Candidate Reed, do you support alternatives to incarceration, including electronic monitoring, mental health court, and drug court? What's your position on restorative justice, and then why or why not?
So yes to all of those. I was very fortunate that Judge Biskupik and Judge Desjardins and Judge Gill in Outagamie County have invited me to participate in the treatment courts, the veterans courts, and the mental health courts in Outagamie County. These are such wonderful tools. These are alternatives to the typical legal track for criminal defendants, and they just provide an awesome opportunity. The bracelet is another different thing that offers an alternative to incarceration, and I certainly support that. But let me get back to the treatment court. Sitting in the Outagamie County treatment courts and watching how that was conducted, and watching the effect that it had on the offenders and the progress that they made, this is why I want to do this. This is why I want to be involved in the judicial system. Our legislature made this second branch in Calumet County that we're so fortunate to have, large in part because we need to set up a treatment court. I've been involved in the treatment court in Outagamie County. I've had some great mentors in the judges I've mentioned, and I've seen it in play. Folks, we're gonna help people, and we're gonna save the citizens money from repeat incarceration. It's a win-win for everybody, and I certainly look forward to that as the next judge.
Candidate Tenorelli.
Thank you. I do agree with alternatives to incarceration. It's just too cost prohibitive to incarcerate minor crimes or crimes that aren't worthy of incarceration. Unfortunately, Calumet County is too small to have all of those different specialized courts, but we are lucky enough to be able to start the drug treatment court, and that was mandated by the legislature in order to get the second judge. As for restorative justice, we did that in Calumet County, in Fond du Lac County. We basically gave that option to the victim, and if the victim wanted to meet with the defendant either before or after sentencing and make statements as to how the crime affected them, it really had an impact on some defendants, and they really made some changes in their lives, because oftentimes criminals don't know their victims other than sitting in the courtroom. And so when they're meeting with them one-on-one, they really realize this person is real. It's not some stranger that I took this purse from, or it's not some car that I took. It actually belonged to somebody and they worked long and hard to get it. So I think restorative justice is a really good tool. Obviously, it's not for every case, just like alternatives aren't appropriate for every case. There are some cases that people will need to go to prison, and then there are other cases that we can look at alternatives.
Okay, Candidate Tenorelli, how will you ensure you remain impartial in practice and appearance while serving in this judicial office? What can be done to combat the public's growing concern of judicial partisanship and its effect on court decisions?
Well, I'm sorry, can you just repeat the beginning of that question again?
Sure. How will you ensure you remain impartial in practice and appearance while serving in this judicial office? What can be done to combat the public's growing concern of judicial partisanship and its effect on court decisions?
Well, to ensure that I'm fair and impartial, I guess the first thing I would say is take a look at my campaign. I'm not affiliated with any party or group of individuals. I don't have a bias or support of Republican or Democrat. We can't have that, but oftentimes campaigns such as this in the background have that running. Second, I would encourage citizens to reach out to my current and past coworkers and others who I've worked with in the justice system and the county over the years, law enforcement officers, probation and parole agents, social workers, department heads, administrators, and how I've handled myself in the courtroom and in my job as a whole. I have the utmost, I follow ethical standards, and I go above and beyond that. To ensure to remain impartial, I think we are lucky that we have elected a judiciary and not appointed, because I think when it's appointed, you do have much more of the political background to it. We're elected, not so much. Once a judge is on the bench, however, I think you constantly have to check yourself. Am I making these decisions based on a personal opinion, or am I making these decisions based on the facts and the law before me? And I am confident that I will be able to, because I was able to do that for 16 years as a prosecutor, and am able to do that in my civil practice that I've been in corporation counsel. I base it on the case before me. Thank you.
Candidate Reed?
Thank you. First and foremost, I'm so fortunate that I have 19 area judges who support me. And if you take a look at these folks, they come from all walks of life. There are some conservative judges and there are some liberal judges. I have countless attorneys who have signed up and said Carrie Reed should be the next judge. And these folks too. There are some liberal attorneys, there are some conservative attorneys. They come from all walks of life. The reason for this, I believe, is that I've been doing this for 24 years. The things that people say about me is that I'm fair, I'm impartial, I don't subscribe to one belief or the other, and they look to me as having the competence and the legal skills and the ability to handle any case that comes before me. I wouldn't have folks from both sides of the aisle willing to support me if I couldn't be fair and impartial. I assume that whatever I've done to gain their respect over the last 24 years, I'm going to continue doing in the next 24 years. I'm a fair guy, and if you have any question about that, go to my website and see what these folks are saying.
Candidate Reed, would you recuse yourself from all cases in which one of the parties has made a substantial contribution to your election campaign? Why or why not?
Well, for the most part, I'm funding my campaign. I'm getting some contributions from folks. I'm fortunate that I don't believe that I have that problem where someone has made a substantial contribution. I suppose if someone did, I probably would. But again, at this point, I don't have that issue before me. Be a nice problem to have, but I don't have that problem.
Candidate Tenorelli.
I would. I think that even if I believe that I could decide the issue before me fairly and impartially, I think the appearance would be that I'm biased based on the donations that I've gotten, and so I would absolutely recuse myself. Thank you.
Okay. Candidate Tenorelli, we'll start with you. What specific policy initiatives about domestic violence or sexual assault, particularly those in oppressed and marginalized communities, are you interested in and why?
I get the long ones. Can you repeat that question again?
can, yes. That's okay. It helps you both when you hear it again. What specific policy initiatives about domestic violence / sexual assault, particularly those in oppressed and marginalized communities, are you interested in and why?
I have always been, I don't know if you want to say interested, but it has been a passion of mine for fairness in domestic violence cases as it relates to victims. I started off that way, and many prosecutors run from domestic violence cases because they're difficult. Victims recant, they make a complaint, or they indicate what had happened, and then they have the honeymoon period and they make up with their offender, or the offender makes promises to them and they recant, and so they don't want to testify. So I handled hundreds of those cases, and I've seen victims be really, really shattered by the constant cycle of domestic violence. I would support initiatives presented to me as a judge. I don't think I should be the one presenting initiatives because I do have to be fair and impartial. If the prosecutor's office came to me with some ideas that they had on how to handle domestic violence cases, or the public defender's office or other attorneys, I would absolutely listen to them. And if I thought it benefited Calumet County, I would absolutely, I would absolutely agree and implement them. But I think a judge has to be very careful when they are taking initiatives to do something that might help one side over the other, because as a judge, we have to be impartial.
Candidate Reed?
Thank you. Throughout my career, I've had a number of cases, number of family law cases, where the common theme running through those cases is some sort of abuse, whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, or emotional abuse. It's a sad fact, but it's one of the facts that presents itself in so many cases. I've also been involved in restraining order cases where men, women, children have been abused, oftentimes sexually abused. One of the early things that I did in my career was made a connection with the Harbor House here in the Fox Valley. I don't pretend to have all the answers to all issues, but I do know where to go when there's a specific issue, and Harbor House has been such a wonderful resource. They have all sorts of tools for folks who are experiencing abuse. They've educated me immensely. I'm constantly learning, and I'm so fortunate to have groups like that. Going forward on the bench, I'll continue to use every single resource available to me. Anybody who has ideas, whether it's Harbor House, whether it's any victims' rights organization, I'll utilize them and I'll go to them. I think one of the most important things about being in that type of position is knowing who the resources are and knowing how to get people to them. And I've been so fortunate in my career to be able to do that.
Candidate Reed, what measures do you think could be pursued to reduce the amount of recidivism of offenders?
Hey, that's great. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the treatment court. One of the things that treatment court does is, again, we run into the common theme throughout so many cases is drug use. It's here in Calumet County, and if you think it isn't, you're fooling yourself. Methamphetamines and heroin and prescription drugs have become the plagues of our legal system. The problem with it is when folks get caught, they'll get their punishment, they'll get out, they'll get back into their drug addiction, they'll come back, and it just becomes a repeat cycle. It's bad for the person who's in it, it's bad for the victims of the crimes, and it's bad for the citizens of Calumet County because we have to pay for that justice over and over and over. So what the treatment court is designed to do is get these folks who are amenable to treatment, get them into the treatment court, monitor them, watch their progress. They come back to court repeatedly for hearings with the judges, with the social workers, to kind of see how they're doing. And the idea is to keep them from coming back to the court for the same crime in the future. If we can do that, we're going to save them. If we can do that, we're going to save the victims of their crimes. And if we can do that, we're going to save everybody in Calumet County, the citizens and the taxpayers. It's a great question. It's a great opportunity for this county, and I'm so excited to head that treatment court.
Candidate Tenorelli.
Thank you. To reduce recidivism, boy, that's a difficult one. I do agree that treatment court is a tool that can be used. Based on my experience in the criminal arena, and I've handled over 700 felony cases and over 2,400 misdemeanor cases, whereas my opponent has handled just about 100, and that's based on CCAP statistics. You see the same people over and over again, and you want to stop that cycle. And a lot of times it's just it is drug addiction, and people are committing crimes in order to get the drugs that they need. Sometimes it's mental health illness that they know better, but they can't stop themselves, or somebody needs to help them get through those crises. So I think that programming is key, but I also understand and realize that people, especially not necessarily mental health, because that's different, but people have to want to change. And I think part of that is educating them to see what they can do if they change. They may have come from a very difficult background, and so they don't know any better. But if you educate them to say, if you do this, if you really actively involve yourself in programming, this could be your life. But if you don't take the time to do that, you will have continued recidivism based on my number of 16 years experience as a prosecutor. Thank you.
Okay, Candidate Tenerelli, what is your approach to juvenile offenses?
So as the juvenile justice prosecutor, I looked at juvenile offenses a little differently than I did adult criminal offenses. And for juvenile, I handled about 1,100 juvenile delinquency cases. Unfortunately, CCAP, you can't see those, so I can't advise this to Attorney Reed, but based on the fact that he's handled a total of 781 cases for all of the categories, I would say that I have a significant more experience in the delinquencies. Kids are learning. Sometimes they don't know any better, or they don't understand the consequences. And so a lot of times it's not the hammer coming down on them. It's really just explaining and letting them know through them learning it. You can talk to a juvenile, but they're not listening. So you have to actively involve them in not necessarily treatment, but get them in teen court, get them before their peers, have them talk to victims to see how it's actually affecting them. It has to be at their level, because just talking to them, they tune you out. So you have to make programs that are specific, where juveniles will pay attention and realize that this is not the life they want to go down to. And I think based on my experience, I have a good understanding of how that process will help them and work. Thank you.
Candidate Reed, what's your approach to juvenile offenses?
Thank you. I think like I said in the beginning, the thing that sets me apart from my opponent is I haven't just been a government attorney. I represent individuals. I represent people. I don't represent numbers. I represent juveniles. I'm the guardian ad litem in countless cases, Outagamie County, Calumet County, Winnebago County. Again, I represent people. This isn't about numbers. We don't get a prize for how many cases we file. And it's a bit misleading to look at CCAP and grab numbers, because what you don't see is you don't see the cases that are in the files, or the cases that we're working on. Every case that I have isn't a filed case. When I do a harassment case occasionally for someone and write a letter and negotiate a settlement, that case does not get filed and it won't be on CCAP. Injury cases, negligent cases are not on CCAP. So again, this isn't about numbers, this is about people. And again, I think that that's what sets me apart from my opponents. I represent individuals. I don't represent numbers, and I don't treat the law that way, and I won't treat it that way on the bench. As far as juveniles, as I said, I am the court-appointed guardian ad litem on numerous cases in the various counties that I mentioned. I work directly with the juveniles. I work with their parents, with the social workers. My approach will be to continue that as judge for Calumet County, and I'll treat everybody as an individual. Nobody will be a number when they come to my court.
Candidate Reed, how do you envision your work with school districts and municipalities that cover multiple counties?
That's also a great question. Again, having been in private practice, I've had the fortunate ability to do a variety of different things, one of which is school law and one of which is municipalities. So with regard to school districts, like my daughters, they go to Kimberly High School. They started out in Woodland grade school, middle school in Calumet County, and Kimberly is a high school that handles kids from both Outagamie County and Calumet County. So I think I'll be able to handle those cases that come before the court seamlessly. You know, the laws that apply throughout the state of Wisconsin are largely similar. The laws that are within the individual municipalities are also largely similar. To the extent that there are differences, that is something that, given the experience that I've had for the last 24 years dealing with municipal law, dealing with school law, I'll be able to handle on day one as the next judge in Calumet County. I look forward to the opportunity. I look forward to the variety. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I got into this. And this is why I think I have so much to give back, being someone who's 54 years old, 24 years of experience. The variety is the spice of life, and it's going to be the spice of my legal career going forward. I look forward to the challenge.
Candidate Tenorelli.
Thank you. I am currently working with multiple school districts right now. I and a couple other individuals started the child welfare collaborating team in Calumet County, and that was bringing in school districts and the courts to work on issues affecting child welfare and how to improve those processes and procedures as it relates to the Department of Human Services working with school districts and working within the justice system. So right now I'm working with the superintendent in Chilton. She's the representative of the Chilton School District, and I'm working with the representative in Hilbert. I believe she's the counselor over in Hilbert, and we're working on ways how to educate teachers on what the Department of Human Services does, because they make a report of neglect and then they don't really know what happens, or they're not really sure when to report neglect. So we're working on training with the teachers. As it relates to the multiple districts, I work with that in because there are several municipalities that are in Outagamie County and also in Calumet County, Appleton, Menasha. And so you have to deal with those different entities. You deal with them the same, but you have to realize that they're different entities and work with them according to their policies and procedures in order to get along with their cases and how they handle them. So I've had experience.
Thank you. Candidate Tenorelli, how do you propose and envision the collaboration with county, juvenile, and the other array of human service agencies?
Collaboration between, I'm sorry.
Collaborating with county juvenile services and other human services agencies.
Well, being the juvenile justice prosecutor and now as the Calumet County Corporation Counsel, handling CHIPs and delinquencies and termination of parental rights, I work extremely closely with human services. And part of this collaborating team is working with the bench to find out exactly what the bench is looking for in the reports that the department sends, how often they want to see the parents in CHIPS cases, working together to do what's best for these kids in these CHIPS cases. And if the department has one idea and the courts have another, they need to work together to know where they're both going. And sometimes those clash because they don't know what the other arena's goal is or focus is. So when you bring them together and you work together, because everyone's goal is to do what's best for the children in these cases, best interest of the child. When you work together, you're going to have a much better outcome than if you're working separately on different tracks, even though your goal is the same. So I have worked with hundreds of social workers, both in Fond du Lac and Calumet County in my 22 years in law, and I have no concerns about my ability to work with the department and collaborate on issues that would come before the bench. Thank you.
Candidate Reed?
Thank you. So I'm very fortunate that the judges in Outagamie County have made me one of the 6 guardians ad litem that work with juvenile cases. And we work on the CHIPS cases. We work on the family law cases, and we work with the departments in Outagamie County. Judge Freilich in Calumet County also appoints me to these cases. Attorney Tenorelli and I are working on a case as we speak. So I've had the experience working in multiple counties with multiple social services agencies, with multiple social workers. We have a thing in Outagamie County called CASA, which is a volunteer organization that works with the families. I'd love to have those in Calumet County. They're so helpful. I've done nothing but been impressed with all of the agencies that are involved in the juvenile justice system, and I look forward to incorporating that and keeping it going in Calumet County. They do such a nice job, and the education that they provide and the services that they provide, just you can't say enough about them. So I'm excited about the opportunity.
Okay, we'll start with candidate Reed. Can you give me 2 pros and 2 cons that you see with Marcy's Law and the Crime Victim Right Board recommendations that came out in 2019, 2020 regarding victim rights?
So listen, the issue with victim rights and with the rights of the accused are constantly in conflict. It's my belief that victims need to be supported from the beginning of the justice system to the end of the justice system. I support every program that can do that and every program that can accomplish that. I can't limit to 2 pros of that system. I think that it just definitely is something that benefits folks. You talk about the cons of victim rights advocacy and the cons of victim rights laws. I think what you got to do is you're constantly weighing things as a judge. You constantly have to weigh the rights of the accused versus the rights of the victim. Too often, the victim have gotten lost along the way, and also too often the rights of the accused have been trampled. So again, as a judge, what I will do is fairly weigh all of the evidence before me. I'll fairly weigh the cases that come before me, and I believe that that's how you achieve justice. So victim rights are at the forefront of my concerns, so are the rights of the accused. I think I can balance that just fine as judge, and I look forward to it.
Candidate Tenorelli.
Thank you. So Marcy's Law, for those out there that don't know, was passed last year or the year before. And it basically wants to put the equal footing for victims' rights on, along with the constitutional rights of the accused. And as Attorney Reed indicated, they're both at odds because the defendant is on the opposite side as the victim. For 2 pros for Marcy's Law is that it supports victims' rights, and it does address potentially the inequities that victims see and that others see as it relates to the constitutional rights of the defense. 2 cons, and I'm not sure if you'd say they're cons, but we have a very strong victims' rights statute and law in the state of Wisconsin. So in reading articles about Marcy's Law, I'm not sure how much has really changed because Wisconsin has one of the most strict victims' rights laws that we have. So I guess you could say that's a con with Marcy's Law, that it's not much different than what we currently have. And I think that you do have to weigh the victim's rights along with the defendant's rights, but I think you also have to be equally mindful. And I know some judges don't like to, or it can get time consuming to worry about both sides of the fence, but you still have to do that. And I would do that. I would ensure the rights of both.
Thank you. Candidate Tenorelli, well, we have 2 questions. You've mentioned guardians ad litem a number of times. So I've got 2 questions about that. The first one is, do you think guardians ad litem should only be attorneys? Would you be open to supporting a change in the statute to allow other professionals to serve in this role, such as social workers, family life professionals, etc.?
Was there another part of that?
That's a separate question. So
okay.
Yeah, that's even longer.
Okay. So for guardian ad litems right now, you have to be an attorney. And because we don't have non-attorneys out there right now, I guess I'm not sure how that would work, because guardian ad litems are also ensuring that the individuals, they are focused on the best interest of the child if it's in juvenile cases. So a child might say, I want to go home. But that's not in their best interest. Their best interest is to stay in foster care, to stay with their grandparents, because their parents haven't made enough improvement so that the child would be safe. So I guess it could work. I'm not sure how it would work. In order to make an argument in front of the court, in order to make any legal argument, you have to be an attorney in the state of Wisconsin. So that could potentially limit those people from legal arguments. They could give their opinion, but it could, I'm not really sure how that would work. It could violate the ethical rules as to not practice as an attorney when not a licensed attorney. And I think attorneys have a good understanding, or they should have a good understanding of what the court has to consider in those juvenile cases. If they're trained appropriately, non-attorneys, I think, could hold that position, but it's a good thought.
Okay.
I'd have to
Okay.
think.
Candidate Reed, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. So I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to be one of the guardian ad litems for Calumet County and for Outagamie County, and I do some work in Winnebago County as well. And we have a good group of guardian ad litems, and so I'm fortunate to be able to bounce things off of them. I think one of the things as guardian ad litem is knowing that you don't know everything. And if you can be humble enough to accept that you need help from other folks, I think you're going to do a much better job as a guardian ad litem. So what I do, and what the folks that work with me do, is we rely on the other professionals. We rely on the psychologists, the doctors, the pediatricians, the social workers, the moms and the dads. That's the kind of thing that gives us information. If you can start by knowing that you need to know more and you know where to go, I think you can do a good job. Now to get to your question, I do believe that attorneys are the appropriate resource for guardian ad litems, but those attorneys need to access the information from the other professionals. You need to get information from those who treat the child. You need to get information from those who raised the child. If you can do that, I think you can safeguard the best interests of the child or the adult. So I do believe that it needs to be attorneys, but I do believe you need to rely heavily on other professionals to do a good job.
Okay, Candidate Reed, this is the second question on guardian ad litem, and it is a scenario, so it's a little bit longer. This question was, how would you handle a request to terminate a previously approved permanent guardianship not related to foster care or protected care? Okay. Do you expect the biological parent to make the request and meet the minimum level of parenting, like say an apartment for 6 months and a job for 6 months, or show some fault in the guardian's care? Or in the case where the biological parent only cared for the child for a few days of their early life and the child now has an established family and household they are attached to, would you be more likely to try to rule in the best interest of the child? I know this is a difficult scenario, but these are the kinds of things I know that you've run into. So,
yeah, you're right. They're all difficult, but listen, there's not one thing, there's not two things, there's probably not 6 things that are the most important when dealing with what is in the best interests of the child. So you listed a number of things, whether the mom, dad, or potential guardian had a job for 6 months, an apartment for 6 months, or these other factors. They're all important. Don't get me wrong. Every single one of them are important. Whether the child has had a relationship with the current guardians, the folks that the time, also extremely important. And as I said in the other question, the input that you get from the other professionals, the social workers, the doctors, the psychologists, all of that stuff is important. So whenever there is an issue about changing a guardianship or eliminating a guardianship, I've done a number of those. All of those factors come into play. And if I'm representing a mom or a dad who wants to get their children back, I'll advocate for them. And I tell them, hey, listen, you got to have the facts behind you. You've got to have what is in the best interest of that particular child behind you. And that's the kind of thing I'll look for as judge. Again, it's so many factors. You need to be amenable to listening to them all. I think that's what makes a good guardian ad litem, and that's what's going to make a good judge.
Candidate Tenorelli?
Thank you. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, you have a child that was placed in a guardianship or under a guardianship, away from their family, away from their biological parents, and now the biological parents want their child back, if I'm understanding the question correctly. So in those types of cases, if the court has ordered guardianship, typically it's because the parents, if this was through a CHIPS, a Child in Need of Protection and Services case, if it went to guardianship, it's typically because the parents were not able to achieve the goals that the court set for them in order to get their children back. If they do achieve those goals as time goes on, the court does need to consider whether the children should be going back to their biological parents. However, you have to consider what has happened in the meantime with the children. A child's life goes on. It doesn't stop waiting. It doesn't stop while they are waiting for parents to do what they need to do to get their child back. So if the child or children have significant bonds with their guardian, and oftentimes in these types of situations, it's grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, it's a family member, and they have formed this bond, you do have to, and it's utmost important to consider the best interest of the child. If it is not in the child's best interest, then they should not go back with their biological parents. It all
Thank
depends
you.
on the facts.
We'll start with candidate Tenorelli. So you've mentioned a couple of times here that when the second judge was proposed for Calumet County, that the drug court was discussed. So we've talked about all the benefits and your experiences, but how would you go about setting one up? How do you do that?
Great question. Okay, so I was fortunate to be in Fond du Lac County when they started the drug court. So I was lucky enough to see how that was created. I'm aware of the process they took, and I've also researched other drug courts. I've researched Calumet, Winnebago, Outagamie, La Crosse, and Waukesha. Waukesha has been known to have a very good drug treatment court program. And I've been involved and observed those cases in Fond du Lac County. So in order to move forward with the drug treatment court in Calumet County, it takes a group. It's not just the judge saying, this is how the drug court's going to be run, and that's how it's run. I would recommend and I would support that we reach out to your partners, probation and parole, the prosecutor's office, the public defender's office, Department of Human Services, treatment providers, law enforcement officials, to collaborate on creating the policies to set up the drug court. I get feedback from the community as to what they see would be important in the drug court. Perhaps they have somebody drug addicted, or they've been drug addicted themselves, and they have good ideas as to what works, what doesn't work. Once those policies and procedures would be in place, this judge would be handling those cases. So I would suggest that a couple of cases go through the system using that model, policies, see if there's any issues that need to be tweaked and tweak them, and then have more cases go through the drug court.
Candidate Reed?
Thank you. It's a great question. So last month when I was sitting in on the treatment court in Outagamie County, afterwards we had a meeting with the judge that was involved and the treatment coordinators and the county coordinators, and they mentioned to me that if I'm successful, that I should reach out to them and they'd help set up the treatment court in Calumet County. I said, be careful what you ask for, because I'm coming to you guys. And so I'm very fortunate to have that relationship with those folks. That is something that I can reach out to, and we're not going to be recreating the wheel. That's already been done. These folks are going to step in and they're going to help us. Very fortunate to have had Judge Biskupik as my mentor from the beginning of my legal career. He's the first judge who got me involved in the treatment courts. with Commissioner Maureen Budiak in Outagamie County, who's handling one of the treatment courts, and with Judge Mitch Metropolis. And again, I'm going to hold the treatment court coordinator to her word, and she's going to be more than happy to help us out. I'm very excited about the opportunity Calumet County is going to have for the treatment court. I think I have good relationships with the resources to get that done, and we'll definitely get it done for Calumet County. So fortunate to have this opportunity.
So our time is really dwindling here. I have two more questions I'd like to get to. So I'm going to arbitrarily ask you to name this tune in 1 minute instead of a minute and a half. And so there's two questions. We'll start with candidate Reed. The first is, what's your position on engaging in conversations surrounding system change in Calumet County? Would you be open to attending coordinated response teams or other community coalitions to effectuate change? 1 minute.
I can do that in 30 seconds and less. Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely, I would. Listen, as I said in one of my answers earlier, you have to know what you don't know, and you have to be willing to go to other resources to make yourself better. We're going to be a better court in Calumet County by having a drug court. We're going to be a better court in Calumet County by having 2 judges. We're just going to have more resources, more information. And when we have the 2 judges, we're not done. When we have the treatment court, we're not done. Constantly going out and improving ourselves as a court is going to be my goal as a judge. So yes, yes, and yes. I think that we should go to outside resources and always try to make ourselves better.
Candidate Tenerelli.
Thank you. I've been promoted to a captain.
Yes.
The coordinated response teams, I've worked with SART teams, the sexual assault response teams, and I've worked with the domestic violence intervention teams. And actually in Outagamie County, when I was the domestic violence prosecutor, we worked on a worksheet so that when officers would go out and investigate these domestic violence cases, they would have a checklist that they would go through and the questions that they would ask to help in prosecution, because we know these victims would recant. So absolutely, I would work with coordinated response teams. I have in the past. I've been very active in the domestic violence intervention team in Outagamie County, and I would be more than happy to work with those teams and get them in Calumet County as well. Thank you.
Okay, so here's our final question, and we're going to, you get the first chance at it, candidate Tenerelli, and I'm going to ask you to only now, both of you, just focus on yourself. Why should citizens of Calumet County vote for you? I don't want to hear about your candidate, your opponent. Why should they vote for you? Okay.
So I have overwhelming case handling experience compared to my opponent. I have significant jury trial experience and experience with drug and OWI cases, which in Calumet County are the majority of cases. In looking at the numbers, and I know I was shamed into saying it's not about the numbers. It actually is about the numbers in some cases. 55% of all cases in Calumet County are felony, misdemeanor, traffic cases. And I have experience in all those cases. I'll be neutral, fair, and impartial. I do not have allegiances to any individuals or businesses. I did not seek out endorsements. When I was running, I have the intellect for the position and the legal issues I'm unfamiliar with. I have the drive to do the research to research those. I would be respectful to those in the courtroom. I treat people fairly. I would work with others to make the Calumet County Drug Treatment Court the best it could be. And I will not be a politician, and I will not legislate from the bench. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Reed.
Thank you. 3 reasons that I'm the most qualified are that I'm the local candidate. I live in Calumet County. I have lived here for 19 years. I know this county. I love this county, and this is going to be my home because it is my home. I'm not going to move here if I win. I live here now, and I'm going to stay here. That's the first reason. The second reason is I simply have more experience. I've been doing this for 24 years. I've been a special prosecutor. I've done criminal defense. I've done children's law. I've done family law. I've done negligence law. I've done business law. I've done school law and municipality law. and I've got a timekeeper telling me I'm running out of time, I will be able to handle any case that comes before me on day one as your next judge. And probably the most important thing is I'm so proud to be trusted by so many judges, so many law enforcement, so many attorneys who say, you know what, they know both of us and they think that Carrie Reed should be the next judge in Calumet County. That's very humbling, and I appreciate their support. I'm honored to have their endorsement.
Thank you. I just have a few closing slides and a few things to say. And I just need to thank both of you so much for your time. And I have learned more about circuit court judging from your responses and your answers. And I appreciate that. So there's a slide of an upcoming event. And we have voting timeline reminders. So yesterday was the last time that you could register online. So from now on till election day, you have to register at the clerk's office or on election day at the polls. But remember, when you do that, you have to have both your proof of residence and your ID. Online absentee ballot request, myvote.wi.gov. It's easy to do online. That's your go-to source. And actually, I received my absentee ballot in the mail today. So they're being sent out. They're suggested that you get these back, that you mail them back in by March 23rd, just so that they have plenty of time to get there. In-person absentee voting starts Monday, March 23rd and goes to April 2nd during regular hours, but please check your municipality for the times because sometimes they make adjustments to evening hours and then they start later in the day to accommodate those. So please double check what times your the in-person absentee voting starts in your municipality. And the slide that I showed earlier, it was about circuit courts. The website is there, but this website is also, that link that you see there is on our web page. So that's the easiest place to get it. They also have information on the state superintendent of schools and what they do, lots of other information on there for some of those down ballot races that aren't the high profile ones or the ones that we tend to know most about. And I think we have one more slide. An upcoming event, there's going to be a virtual legislative town hall that we're going to be conducting on March 30. These are not candidates, they are legislators. And so it's an opportunity to ask those people who are already in office about what's going on and what they're thinking and what they're planning. So it's a feedback session, and I hope you can join us for that. And then we have one slide of websites. So we have been busy doing forums, and all of these forums are going to be, the recordings are going to be up on our website, as well as we will have the candidate guides. I have the candidate guides for all of those that were held before this week already up. Thank you, Dave, our technician, and including the Appleton Area School District School Board Forum and candidate guide. So if you also, I want to offer this service. If you are living at home and you have not had your shots and you're not, and you do need someone to witness your absentee ballot, be assured that the league can help you with that. We know what the laws are and what the rules are and can help you out in that situation if you don't have someone available to witness your ballot. And then My Vote, checking registration, polling location, all of that information is on myvote.wi.gov, and nonpartisan voter information is vote411.org. And that's it for the slides. I want to thank you again to the candidates for Calumet County Circuit Court Judge. I really appreciate the time and your interesting answers to all of these questions that before we did this forum, I hadn't even thought of. And thanks to everyone who sent in questions. Thank you to the members of the league who helped to make this forum possible. Jeannie, Julie, Dave, Barb, Shirley, Brian, and others. And I want to say good evening to all of you, and we hope you will join us at future events. And don't forget to vote on April 6th. Thank you.
Thank you.